Hello, Sex Therapy 101 friends. You notice I might have taken a break, but we're back and we're excited. And I'm really passionate about this new series that I'm going to be offering to all of you. I haven't disappeared. I've been working on some projects that are really meaningful to me. And one of those is a book for the public about my research about regarding long-term outcomes of consenting to unwanted sex or duty sex, as we sometimes call it. And in doing that, adding to my own research over the year, you'll see my hair change, my face change, because these were all recorded over the course of a year. And I wanted to talk to experts about the cultural implications or cultural beliefs or the cultural ideas among different communities in the US that might protect people against negative outcomes and that might actually kind of promote people into some of the more negative outcomes. And that is the series I have to offer you. I'm really excited. It's been really meaningful to me. It's been enlightening to me. It's really helped me make sure that this book is what I want it to be for all of you. So with no ado, here we go. This is going to be the intro for the whole series. And I'll give you a little bit of a bio for each, and then we'll jump into the recording of the interview. This interview was really fun. It was done with Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fyfe, who's an LDS relationship and sexuality coach. She has a PhD in counseling psychology. Her teaching and coaching focus on helping those in the LDS community, both individuals and couples, create a greater sense of connection and passion in their emotional and sexual relationships. I really wanted to talk to Dr. Jennifer about this because I appreciate her thoughtful approach. She's brilliant in my mind. She's creating movement in a group that it's hard to create movement in, and I respect her incredibly. So I hope you enjoy the conversation I had about duty sex with Dr. Jennifer Finlayson-Fyfe. Okay.
Mhm.
So first of all, thank you.
Sure. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
And so I think you watched that 10-minute video that I was just distilling down the findings. Lisa
Yeah.
Diamond and I are hoping to publish it, but in the meantime, I'm going to write a book proposal. But the sample was so homogeneous
Yeah.
that I want, and I don't want to be having this discussion in my own echo chamber
Yeah. Yeah.
of
Yeah.
my own creation.
Sure. Sure. No, definitely. Hey, can you just tell me, how did you get your sample? Like what was the thing that drew people to it?
I tried to do a couple versions and the random selection, like using MTurk, which is like Amazon research, where there's people who are getting paid to do surveys. That didn't fly. So it was all social media, which means it probably was an algorithm of somebody liked this. And so then it showed up, it was an invitation on social
Yeah.
media. So I think that's why it stayed really homogeneous.
Yeah. Yeah. And were you looking specifically for Mormon women, or you were just looking?
No,
No, it just happened to be a lot of Mormon women.
it did happen to be a lot of Mormon. The
Yeah.
only requirements were like uh I think English as a first language, because none of the
Yeah.
assessments had been validated in any other languages.
Yeah.
Over 30, because we were look any
Yeah.
research we have now is for co-ed women.
Yeah.
Had been in a relationship longer than 3 years because we were wanting to get data outside of the limerence phase and long
Yeah.
term. And they could say, I think I've consented to unwanted sex. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
So those were
Yeah.
the criteria.
Okay. Yeah. And you just happen to get, I mean, you're in Idaho. I think, did you post it? Did we post it in the group? Like my group was
Yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
And
not critiquing that. I'm just like, I was just curious, like,
yeah.
and you were basically saying those were the criteria. You have to be over 30. You have to be married more than 3 years. You have to have consented to unwanted sex.
Mhm,
And then
mhm,
you were looking at that. Okay. Good.
mhm.
I just wanted to kind of get a sense of, was it like the population? I mean, like, was it like women who were just in a sexual relationship, but they had already agreed that they had consented to unwanted
Yeah.
sex at some point?
Yeah.
Okay. Got it.
Oh, and that they didn't have a history of sexual violence or
Yeah.
abuse because we
I
didn't want
remember
to
that.
conflate
Yeah.
the trauma source.
Yeah.
Um, So, I mean, we had people all across the country, but really centralized Idaho, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, this corridor we've got over here in the Intermountain
Yeah.
West that's really influenced by
Yeah.
religion.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Okay. I mean, so
So that first question is, when you watch
Right.
that video and you've got
What
your
were my
own,
responses
yeah,
to it? I
your
mean,
own clinical
there's
lens.
so many. It's just a bad idea in general to say yes to sex that you don't desire because it sets off a whole set of patterns that are very bad. And when I say you don't desire it, what I would say is that you can't choose honestly, that you can't say like I want to be here because women's desire is more responsive than it is spontaneous and um but like when women say yes to something that they resent or
Yeah.
they feel that they have to or they have to manage his arousal or they are the ones that have to take care of his sexual needs, and of course this all goes to this LDS culture, but um that it's very, very bad for long-term outcomes for sexual happiness for both people.
Mhm.
And so I mean, we can talk about this more in the follow-up questions, but it fits a lot of the work that I've done around the culture kind of teaching men that they have sexual needs, teaching women that they are the ones that ought to take care of those sexual needs, that men are the ones that have desire, women are desirable. And, just kind of teaching women an orientation of duty
Mhm.
around sexuality. You could argue you teach men duty around providing and, that they also have duties in the marriage. But, I have lots of women who felt like, okay, he's providing and he's creating the home and this is my job is to create a home and to be kind of the one to handle his sexual needs. And that just doesn't go well. I mean, it makes women hate sex, hate it because it's not about desire, it's not about play, it's not about pleasure, it's not about self. I mean, we can get to this, but there were Mormon women in my dissertation who didn't do that, who saw themselves as equals, who enjoyed their sexual relationship. So that's a group we can learn from, but
Yeah.
yeah, no question that that's just a bad idea. And
You weren't too shocked then. You're like, oh, yeah, I probably could have guessed that this isn't a good idea long
it's
term.
not a good idea. I mean, I think that the thing that I would take issue with in your framing
Thank you. Yeah.
is now this is me just going through that twice, that 10-minute video twice, and without looking at all your questions, how you made sense of them. But
Sure.
there's, in my view, okay, but this is also the framing in which I think about life and working with clients and so on, is the idea that, well, a couple of ideas. One is the question of coercion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, there are a lot of reasons that women have unwanted sex, and
Right.
coercion is just one of them.
Right.
And for me, the question is like, how much psychological control does the partner have?
Mm-hmm.
Because if he has high levels of psychological control over the woman, I would imagine the PTSD element of it would be much higher. That is to say, they're going to have a much more high anxiety, high aversion, um, high stress response to the sexual experience because they really do.
Right.
It's like borderline abusive. They don't feel like, I mean, there's no physical trauma, as you're saying, there's no violence sexually,
Mm-hmm.
but because they see him as having psychological control over her sense of worth, over her financially, I think that's a big variable in understanding coercion because a
Right.
husband pouting, I'm not saying that's pleasant and that it doesn't impact a woman's choices. That's still different than coercion, in my opinion. Okay. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
and in terms of its impact.
Yeah.
So men and women do lots of manipulative things in
Oh,
the
right.
intimacy
Yeah.
of marriage, right?
Yeah.
To pressure each other and so on. The other thing I would be interested in is saying yes to unwanted sex and how much sex you actually have. If you are saying yes and you're having a lot of sex, that's about coercion. Do you know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying?
Mm-hmm.
Where if you're not having a lot of sex, it means the low desire woman is winning. Okay. That is to
Mm-hmm.
say,
Mm-hmm.
she's not without agency. Now, I don't mean to say that she likes the sex she's having or this isn't 100% un unpleasant. I mean, 100%, yeah, unpleasant for her.
Mm-hmm.
That, but that's different than having a traumatic effect,
Mm-hmm.
in
Okay.
my view. In my
Yeah.
view, because there really is the question of how much agency psychologically does she have?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would even say in my clinical, oh, go ahead. You want to
Oh,
say?
I was gonna give you a little bit of
Yeah.
answers for that. So
Yeah.
we used a post-refusal coercion scale that's putting verbal and emotional coercion on a scale with examples of how what
How
their
much
partner
pressure?
did after they said no. So that
Yeah.
was one scale we did measure to look for
Yeah.
that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And then another scale was trying to figure out um, your idea of why they say yes. So there's a
Yeah.
scale that's reasons
Yeah.
for
The person moving
consenting.
towards versus moving away, kind
Yeah,
of, yeah,
yeah,
avoidant
yeah.
versus, yeah.
And we did find with how frequently they're having sex that there were both high levels of these PTSD or psychological emotional sexual responses for those who were frequent and also infrequent. It
Yeah.
was interesting to see the scatter plot.
Yeah. So I mean, again, this is without me really looking at the data
Totally.
in a cold
Totally.
way to really
Yeah.
understand. But the questions that were coming up for me was,
Yeah.
is that a good PTSD response? If it's just
Mhm.
sexual avoidance, that's
Mhm.
not, is that meaning that would be a questionable variable for me because you don't have
Yeah.
to have PTSD to not like the sex you're having
Right.
and
Right.
to avoid it, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, so I would care about that. There's also, in my view, in my experience of working with women, because we're not idiots and we look for control in our lives, right? That a lot of women will have it to like get him to get a week of freedom. You know what I mean? So they'll have the
Totally.
sex, right? But they do it resentfully. They
Hmm.
do it while feeling like they don't have a choice, even though they do. Okay. Like that is to say, they're kind of participating in the idea that they don't have choices when they really do. And I don't mean to say that they're, how to say it. I don't know, let me see if I can explain this better. They're kind of actually participating in the sense of victimhood through that choice. And
Hmm.
so then they feel like I'm the good one. I do this.
Yeah.
I'm the kind of self-righteous martyr. That's what I'm trying to get at. And
Hmm.
so yeah, they're doing it, but it gives them more psychological control in the marriage. Now, I
Hmm.
mean, I really work with the spectrum of women. There are women who are genuine. I had a client where her husband was so like he saw her as the broken one sexually. He would give her such a hard time about not wanting to have it. He would know that she didn't want to have it. He would have it with her anyway. The whole time.
Hmm.
And he's like, I need to feel close to her. I'm like, okay, you know she doesn't want it, and you're saying this makes you feel close to her. You're like, you're whacked. Like this is
Right.
crazy. Right. So there's that. And she would always want to make it her problem because in a way that was less scary for her than standing up to this bully. Okay, so that's one end of the and it's like
Hmm.
pretty normal. I mean, they're no longer Mormon, but that like a
Hmm.
how to say it like this is not an unusual presentation for me
Right. Right.
of the woman who's managing the superior critical husband who hates sex for good reason because it's just managing a child.
Hmm.
But then I've worked with women who like they married into a sexual partnership. They knew it was a sexual partnership. Okay. I don't mean to say that obligates them. They can still say no, but they treat it like they're the righteous one and he's the imposition with his needs. And so
Hmm.
they have the psychological control. And he has all this sexual anxiety he's also learned in his Mormon culture. And she has him by the balls in a sense through kind of shaming that he has this desire, right? So
Yeah.
she's saying yes, but she uses it to accrue her own sense that she's owed in the marriage. So do you see what
Hmm.
I'm saying? Like I
Yeah.
don't see it as somebody who says yes is participating in their own trauma, is being coerced. It's like, and I know you're not making it that simple.
Yeah.
I just think it's a lot more complex
Right.
than what I was seeing in the model. And again, I'm just saying that
Yeah.
without knowing all the details of what's in your
No,
model.
I
Right.
appreciate it because I feel like I'm in the learner position, kind of feeling like, oh, I found this thing. What's
Yeah.
everybody think? Instead of taking the bishop
Yeah.
position of, I found this thing and this is what it is.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah.
like, okay, are
Yeah.
we having this conversation? And if there's some long-term outcomes and wanting to know
Yeah.
what's everybody think this is from? And you're saying it's more complex. We can't look at it that simply.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what you're pointing to is real. I mean, like that is to say, yes, it's true that there are women who I've worked with lots of these women who have learned that they shouldn't say no, that if they do, their husband is going to, I have lots of women whose mothers said to them on the night before their wedding, don't ever say no to him
Oh,
because,
yeah.
there's 100%, so they're, they go immediately into low desire because it turns from, I want to be close to you, this is exciting, into I have a job to do. And it kills the whole ecology of desire.
Hmm.
And then it gets more and more miserable, and they feel more and more without a self in that dynamic, and they absolutely hate it. And their husband's unhappy too because he never feels desired. And sometimes men try to handle that by having more of that bad sex, and it just doesn't go well. So it is real. And it certainly, I've never liked the hypoactive desire diagnosis because
Me either. I'm not a fan.
it's just like, yeah, it's a really nice idea that, look, there probably are women out there who have a more biological, not aversion to sex, right? Or just something that's more innate in them. Either they're high anxiety or they have a low sexual response. But the thing is, it's so contextual, most sexual desire. And a lot of women have been taught and are participating in meanings that make sex undesirable for women. And
Mhm.
so much of my work is about helping women actually look at the meanings and what would be sex worth wanting, and how could they create something more desirable in their lives where they get to be of self, that the sexual
Yeah.
relationship doesn't reflect just their husband's sexual interests, but theirs as well. And so anyhow, I think that um I often am saying to women, low sexual desire is often very good judgment. It's like,
Mhm.
it's not
Worth
desirable.
wanting. Hmm.
Let's look at what's happening, um, because this belongs to you also. So, um, so I would just be careful with the causal element, like
Yeah.
calling it a syndrome. Sometimes I feel like the wrong people take those diagnoses and run with them. And
Oh,
the
for
ones who they
sure.
actually fit are less likely to take them. You know what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
that is, like, oh yeah, I'm married to a narcissist, and in fact, they're the narcissist, So I mean,
Hmm.
we like those ideas that kind of make us feel like victims often and powerless. And I'm about helping women and men, but women in particular, claim get a hold of the meanings to claim what actually will forge the life they want. Because those
Hmm.
are the women who do well in sex. Those are the women who do well in life, right?
Hmm.
And going to that other question of like, so the women who, what was the second question? Like, what is it? I want to make sure I've hit all the ideas there. Like,
You're okay. The second question is about aspects of LDS community that might keep this going, that might promote
yeah,
this.
just to the degree, I mean, it's improving in the LDS community, but just the whole idea of like promising in the temple, it's changed, but you're gonna you defer to your husband as he defers to God. It's just setting up a hierarchy, a
Mhm.
dependence. You're supposed to not have a career. I mean, this is so many of my clientele. Like you are supposed to basically hitch your cart to his horse. And so it makes it the ability to truly be an agent and a self, and excuse me, like very difficult because he does hold your sense of self. He holds your security in life
Mhm.
if you're really buying into that meaning and taking it seriously, not to mention the ways that we talk, as I said earlier, about men having desire, women as being the caretakers. And so when we turn women into caretakers of men's sexuality, you are absolutely working in the meaning that is 100% against sexual desire for women. Women want the opposite. If anything, they want to be taken care of, women who like sex.
Mhm.
They are
Mhm.
surrendering into pleasure. They are not, the nurturing muscle that's saved for children is not operating in a sexual relationship at
Right.
all in good
Yeah.
sex for women. So we educate men and women exactly into the meaning frame that kills desire forevermore.
Mhm. It's interesting because
Um,
that's kind of one of my questions is that we're playing with. Is this a US thing? Is this a religious thing? Is this a gendered thing? And I hear you saying this is a dynamic thing of
yeah.
hierarchy,
Yes, it
which
is. And
removes
it's,
choice and leaves the woman feeling choiceless, even though that's almost a fantasy because there is a
yes,
choice
yes.
there.
I mean, I mean, the more and more that we have laws that allow women to own property, to vote, to drive. Okay, like, you know, women have had more and more structural equality, which is a big deal because when you didn't
Hmm.
have it, when you couldn't divorce him, I mean, it doesn't even matter how autonomous you were in your head, you were
Right.
economically dependent. Now we have created a reality in which we're becoming more and more structurally equal. We can provide for ourselves. We don't have to be married. But there is a psychological lag. And I think it's true inside the church and outside, and probably more pronounced in in like Christian religions and
Hmm.
fundamentalist religions, because they often teach a narrow view of femininity and masculinity, which is about men as head of the house, women as support, and very narrow views of that are much more utilitarian in their focus and not about equality and collaboration and mutuality and so on. So I do see it outside. I mean, like even in my view, the sexual revolution and so on, it's still not gone great for women. Okay, like women are still trying to get one of the challenges is biological. I think women are much more attuned to the desires and feelings of other people than men are as a group in the reverse. That's probably good for keeping babies alive. Women are good at mapping what other people want and feel. But then adolescent girls are trying to prove themselves through being sexual and often having unwanted sexual encounters in high school that look like freedom, but are not about their desire. They're not referencing their desires. They're trying to prove that they're sexually free and liberated and cool, and not taking their own desires seriously, which is a problem, you know? And so I don't know yet. I think we're doing better as a culture as a whole, but I think women taking their own desires seriously is a challenge, and one that's really essential to good sex.
Hmm. Hmm. Anything else on thoughts about how
Well, the women
Mormonism specifically may create
hurt
that?
that. I think, you know, just all the object lessons. I mean, I think these things are happening much less now, but these sort of the desirability element, and that you'll lose your desirability through being sexual. In my own dissertation research, there were women who were masking how much desire and arousal they had from their husband because they were afraid that that would make them seem less virtuous, less spiritual. Um, yeah, I mean, I think the pornography challenge too is that there's just women who feel like they're in this duality of like, I don't want to have sex with you because you are engaging sexual energy elsewhere, and I resent that, and I resent your dishonesty or what. But then I
Right.
feel like I should because you have these sexual needs, and if I don't take care of them, then you will. I think you had a quote in a similar vein to that.
Hmm.
So I think that those are all elements that I see as problematic. I think to go to the next question, like what
Yeah.
who are the women that we can learn from? I think the women who were the minority in my dissertation research, but they were still um th- they were actually fine with the idea of different family roles. Like they were fine with thinking of their husband as the head of the home in a sense. But when it came down to how they actually made decisions, they were collaborative. They made decisions together. They worked together. There was no inequality. There was no like doing what your husband thought. They also had economic capacity, whether or not they were
Mm.
working full time, they could be if they wanted to be. So they were not
The
dependent
choices.
economically. They had choices. So they were choosing the marriage. Um, and they took their desires seriously before they got married and while they're in marriage, both sexually and just on every front. So they were their own force to be reckoned with in the best sense. Like they were a self, and they chose a partner not because they needed a man. And these women often were virginal before marriage. They were conservative in their decisions, but it wasn't to earn a future man's approval. They were like, no, because I care about sex being in a commitment context for me. It was like in line with their own desires.
Mm-hmm.
And so they actually saw the culture as supporting ultimately what they wanted. So again, it wasn't in like trying to defer so that they're good enough and that people say that they're good. It was more like this fits with what I want. And so they were pretty conservative at times and disappointed the men they were dating and things, but they were like unapologetic. And that's really the way I would describe these women is they didn't apologize for their sexuality, for their desires in general and their specific desire and their sexual desires specifically. They really had men that they married men that respected them and
Mm.
cared about their desires. And so they saw, and they also saw, they saw men and women as just fundamentally equal. They saw the body and sexuality as good, like they had no issue with that. So they saw the doctrine of the body as validating of sex. They saw the law of chastity not as a way to earn your value, but more like a way of elevating the meaning of sex in a way that they thought
Mm.
was good for them. Like they were like,
Hmm.
I feel some of the women would say, like, I feel sorry for women that are sort of in this post, they didn't use this language, but like the post sexual revolution culture where men don't owe you anything and like women are out there just like they're like I don't want that. I want a man that's committed. So they saw the culture as sort of supporting their interests. They separated sexism from sexual conservatism, and a lot of times we push those two together, like, you know, to be for women to be free, they should be as
Mm.
free to have uncommitted sex as men are. You know, that kind of idea. That's sort of a
Right.
current cultural idea. And I think that they rejected that idea. They were like, you
Mm.
know, women, and I think the research shows this, as women as a whole prefer more commitment because it's more biologically risky to be sexual. And so psychologically speaking, women tend to prefer a committed partner. Even sexual fantasies
Hmm.
are often around a man who actually values the woman as a whole person. And so anyway, so they were clear that what they wanted in the sexual realm counted and they could ask men to meet it.
I think in the research, right, we've got to look at both, not just this 53% that had negative outcomes, but then that 47 that was like, there weren't negative outcomes. And I hear
Yeah,
you saying like the solution or the difference is that degree of internal authority or
exactly.
internal
Congruity between
legitimacy.
your decision and your, because I was going
Hmm.
through it and I was talking to my husband. I'm like, I bet you've had unwanted sex sometimes, just like
Hmm.
I have. That is,
Sure.
it's like, not really that, but yeah, okay, I'll rally. Like, okay, yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
And but if you can back up your choice, because I think a lot of times people make choices, but then they resent their partner for their choice.
Right.
And that's different. Like somebody who's going to make it so miserable. Okay, your sense of choice is dissipating. Okay, but like if a lot of times we were like, oh yeah, somebody asked us to do something, we say yes, and then we resent them, even though we said yes. I mean, like out of the sexual realm, people can do this
Hmm.
kind of thing.
Hmm.
So yeah, like I think if somebody makes a choice and they can back up their choice, is like, yeah, I can do that. That I don't think it's going to have a negative because you
Yeah.
feel ultimately it wasn't my idea. If it was up to me entirely, I'd say no. But like since I love my partner, we're a partnership. Sometimes we do things that aren't our first idea for each
Hmm.
other, but I can back it up. I can choose it. I can say yes to it sincerely. I
Hmm.
think that's not going to have negative impacts.
That's a protective factor, you'd say.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. What would you do with your lens? You've got this couple on your couch and you see this dynamic. I mean, this kind of
Hmm.
explains your whole shtick.
Yeah.
What,
Yeah.
you've done a fantastic job of making it clear in your career and your work of the theoretical orientation you have, right?
Mhm.
You're really clear on your
Mhm.
lens, and
Mhm.
in all of your work, you're very clear. So
Mhm.
you've got this couple on your couch. You might have done this, had this couple on your couch every day for the last 20 years. I don't know. But
Probably.
you've got this couple on your couch with your lens. How are you going to work with this couple who's experiencing this dynamic?
Well, we're like the specific one where she's saying yes because she feels so coerced.
Yeah, and she's got high anxiety, high avoidance, a developing aversion, and there's this chase run dynamic happening.
The
Um,
first thing I would do is I would be taking him on because I'm just going to go with the archetypal couple here for a moment.
sure, sure, sure.
He's often the higher desire. He condescends to his wife. He thinks of her as having sexual hangups. This is a product of purity culture, and he's ready to kind of diagnose her as being fundamentally flawed.
Have
And
you mic'd my office? Like, is there a,
was
I can
have
relate to
I
all
mic'd it?
this.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
like, have
exactly.
you?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And so he's basically like saying, you need to solve your issues so that we're okay. And the problem, of course, is not only is he doing this in the sexual realm, he's doing this in every realm, which is, I know how things are, and he patronizes his wife. And usually then this woman, if this has been a marriage that's lasted a few years, is on some level complicit. I don't mean to say that she's like evil or something, but she's like complicit in a dynamic where she's trying to make him be okay with her. And so he can readily put pressure on her, and she will tend to yield
Mm-hmm.
to keep him
Mm-hmm.
happy with her, to prove she's trying, to prove she's enough, to prove whatever. And so my first goal in that would be to dismantle his illusion about his wife and himself. Like, who's actually got the problem? Because she's so ready to attach to the idea that she's got a problem rather than her
Mm-hmm.
dislike of sex makes perfect sense with this guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm challenging that, he is asking for a kind of sexual experience that would make any smart woman recoil. And I try to say it as nicely as I can, but I'm trying to show him how undesirable the sex on offer is, because this is about trying to earn a self, prove a self, manage him like another child in her life. And that is completely the opposite of anything close to desire. Now, the other thing is that a lot of men in this sort of archetype here don't actually want a wife that is full of desire and has her own ideas and thoughts and passions. And they're scary, those women, for a weak man like this. They
Mm-hmm.
want the woman to slide underneath them. They
Mm-hmm.
want that kind of control. I want your sexuality to thrive under my control. And that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so it's just helping both of them see what's actually happening and why it makes sense that she doesn't like it. Because I'll say very clearly, like, women, well, this is true for men too, but like, sexual desire thrives in freedom, in the sense of freedom. And if you don't feel like you are free, whether that's real or imagined, that is, whether or not you have a coercive person or you just can't tolerate being a disappointment. Like, some people need so much to be needed that even though they're married to a nice guy, like, they make themselves say yes because they're so uncomfortable disappointing,
Yeah.
right? That they're saying
The
yes to
fear of
things that,
disappointment is
yeah,
so high. Yeah.
yeah, exactly, are not good for them and not good for their partner. And um, so anyway, so this idea of freedom, and that this is not a marriage in which freedom is yet happening.
Mm.
Um, and, then I would be about her working, I'd be helping her to look at her need and fear of not pleasing, her kind of revolving her sense of self around his approval, which is a tough go because he operates in disapproval, like, as a way to get control. So it's approval is not something that's on offer, really. And
Mm-hmm.
so helping her to see the situation better, and to, if this is a marriage she really wants, and she wants sex that she would also enjoy, then it's about him stepping down from his superiority, looking at his own anxieties about sex, which are often a lot of anxieties also, okay, in
Mm-hmm.
my clientele. But when they can frame it on the lower desire partner, they don't have to look at their own anxieties.
Right. They've
And
already decided the problem isn't here.
yeah.
It's not me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you,
Yeah.
exactly. And if you want me sexually, then I don't have to worry about whether or not my sexuality is legit or
Mm.
not. And so it's just an easy target. And being high desire doesn't mean you don't have sexual anxieties. It just means you're higher. It just means you have a lot of testosterone. So it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with how accepting you are of yourself or your sexuality. So anyway, but then it's
You're
about,
right. That is always framed that way, that the higher
yeah,
desire partner has less hangups, but that's absolutely not true.
100% not
There
true in
can
my
be
experience.
tons of Tons of hangups,
Yeah.
tons of anxieties and insecurities, and still high
Yeah.
desire.
Because
Yeah.
I think of sexual integration, which is like a variable that I'm writing about, which is this ability to really be at peace with yourself as a sexual being. So your capacity to be sexually intimate, literally like show up, share your sexuality, care about your impact on a partner, care about them, that's about sexual maturity. High desire is just, I want to have an orgasm. And that's
Hmm.
not necessarily anything to do with maturation
Hmm.
and ability to love anybody or
Yeah.
comfort even with sexuality, because a lot of people can't be intimate with it. They have to have their sexual experience be in non-intimate situations. So I would, and then like figuring out like how she can show up more in the marriage and her ability to say no. Like she can't say yes if she can't say no. If she can't disappoint, if she can't hold her own, if she can't get a hold of what she actually wants. Um, then this is not a marriage that's going to be capable of collaboration and intimacy.
That's a much different take, right? Than a woman made a quote that their therapist had told them, sex is like the dishes, it's just got to get done.
Yeah, that's a terrible, terrible idea.
Yeah, not where you're going to start or go with this
No,
couple.
oh gosh, never.
Never.
Never. And yeah. I mean, there's a lot to say about all that, but no, I would, as soon as you put it into duty, you've killed it ever being about passion. And most people show up talking about frequency with me, but what they're really trying to
Hmm.
get at is passion. They're trying to
Hmm.
get at, I want to feel desired again.
Hmm.
Hmm.
That's helpful. So that's, what you do if this couple landed on your couch. The next question is, what would you do? It might be culturally for you know, uh, the LDS folks, it may just be outside of that dynamic even. But if if you were in charge of making a prevention plan, what do you see needs to happen?
This is in the book I'm working on really is first of all, with kids, if you're talking to kids, you want to talk about sexual integration, not sexual repression,
Hmm.
nor sexual indulgence either. I think both are bad. It's like
Hmm.
either anorexia or, compulsive eating. And neither one are you actually at peace with yourself. What
Yeah.
integration is being able to accept your sexual nature as a human being. And then how do I make choices that accrue to my well-being and the well-being of my relationships? How do I use my sexuality to create goodness in my life and in my, most important relationships, so on. So it's more of a, I have this capacity that's legitimate, but it needs a kind of cultivation to be something capable of really bringing happiness into my life. And so it's so much in religious culture is fear of sex. Like it's kind of almost like Satan is in our sexuality, and that sensual pleasure is not legit for the religious person. And that just sets us up into a constant tug of war internally. And a lot of men think the tug of war is going to be solved when they get married, and then their partner is not interested because she also has anxieties about this sexual part of her. And then he starts talking about his needs, and then she's, trying to fulfill his needs, but nobody's needs are getting met. Like nobody's happy.
Hmm.
And so it's like breaking the whole framing of needs. And instead about how do we learn to create something mutual through our sexuality?
Mm.
How do we learn to love and care about each other and to share our erotic nature with one another in a way that creates beauty and happiness for two people? So like that's a collaborative process, and you have to be
Hmm.
two people that take yourselves seriously to
Yeah.
cultivate something mutual. And
I'm hearing you
so, yeah,
say, let me see if I'm getting this. You're
yeah,
hearing, and I hadn't necessarily thought of it in this term, that mutuality hinges on both people knowing who they are clearly.
yeah.
And in religious households, we're not encouraging people to know themselves sexually.
Mm-mm.
We're really
No,
bypassing that first step that you're
yeah,
saying mutuality hangs on
yeah.
both people's ability to see themselves clearly and know who they are and what they
That's
want.
right. And what I would also say, and I'm writing about this a lot, is that to the degree that depending on the household, because there's in
Sure.
religious households, there's a quite a wide variation in this, but to the degree that you are taught to reference outside of yourself, versus internally. So
Mm.
how much is it about do what authority figures say versus, okay, here are the rules and how do you feel about this? What is your response to this? So you're learning an internal compass to be able to know yourself sexually, but also emotionally and otherwise. You
Mhm.
have to cultivate a strong internal compass. That's really the only way you're capable of intimacy, because I think up until that point it's more in terms of duty and roles and maybe cooperation, even like I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine,
Mhm.
but not really collaborative or
Mhm.
intimate. And so
Mhm.
you have to learn to know who you are. And just a lot of people don't. They are so used to deferring to what others say they should do or should believe or should, you know, think, that they haven't really cultivated an internal reference point that's really quite necessary to have the best kind of intimate relationship.
Why? And you said, why do you not see this as a desire disorder? They're on your couch. She's avoidant, anxious, developing some aversion. Why is this not a desire disorder as outlined in like the clinical
Yeah,
DSM?
because I would just say it's not a disorder. It's a completely congruent response. It's orderly.
Yeah. Wow. That was a really, really acute way of saying that.
Yeah.
Of because it's not a disorder. This is
Yeah.
rational. This makes
This is,
sense.
yes, it's sensical. Because
Yeah.
again, desire and freedom go together. That's why a woman can be low desire, low desire, low desire in a marriage where she feels pressured and she's got it. And then she meets some handsome guy at the gym, and
Mm,
all of a sudden she has a ton of desire
right.
because it's connected to freedom. And I would argue monogamy is arguably tough on the sense of freedom.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
but the more you have forged a self, the more you have freedom, even within a choice of monogamy. So that is because you can belong to yourself and your thoughts and your desires, and you can be honest and authentic. When we need people's approval too much, or we need them to do what makes us feel good too much, then we start feeling trapped by the marriage. And so freedom is it, lots of women don't feel that in their lives. Men have their own versions of this, even like, PE and ED and so on, is
Hmm.
like about anxiety and
Hmm.
about the invalidation they are confronting in sex. Like for men, it's brutal to feel like I am an intrusion. She does not want me here. I have no other legitimate outlet. Like, so they also have their own. I really don't want to frame it as just like women are being acted upon,
Yeah.
because men have their own deep anxieties about this, and it's painful and difficult, and I don't want to be an intrusion on her, but I also feel so alone and unwanted, and it's all very confusing. Like, how do I actually create something better?
Hmm.
And so a lot of people are undereducated. I mean, I think, and so again, just going back to the previous question, and the more that we can create, like, what is it we're actually aiming for? And what is it? And not, shaming and a lot of fear, but more desire based. Like, what am I actually striving to create in my embodiment as a sexual being? That's going to have much better outcomes for us than fear
Yeah.
based.
We're kind of aligned well, we're fairly aligned on that because in the back of my head I was thinking the similar thing of this might be things going right, not things going wrong. This is her
Hmm.
internal wisdom saying
Yeah.
not like this. I don't want it
Yeah.
like this,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that anxiety and that the avoidance
Yeah.
is probably a coping mechanism for the anxiety, but the anxiety being
Yeah.
not something going wrong, but something going right, being like,
Right.
wake up,
Right.
this is not working.
Yeah.
We don't want it like this.
Yeah. The body's signaling this is not working for me. And,
Hmm.
I think where some women get stuck, or low desire people get stuck, is kind of like, what would work for me? Like, what would I
Yeah.
want? I don't mean to say anybody
Mhm.
has to want sex or has to create a sexual relationship.
Right.
Again, everybody gets to choose what they want to do in their life and create in their
Hmm.
life.
Hmm.
But too often it's just like avoid, rather than what is it that I would actually find like to be a good part of my life, or what I would like more of. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That brings us to the last one. And I'm just interested, you've given a lot of thoughts. Are there additional ones that are just op-ed commentary complimentary or not.
Oh,
As we're looking through this and we're
oh
sifting,
yeah.
what is this thing that is showing up in relationships, you know?
I mean, I think the thing that stands out as like important in the work you're doing is just how important it is to not say yes to sex you don't want. Um, my only caution would be not to you, but to anybody who takes that idea is that I've said that a lot. And then I have women who are like, well, I don't want it. So, I'm just not going to say yes to it. And like, again, fair. They really do get to decide, but not like, how to say it? Like, but on the other hand, I am in a partnership. And so, yeah, I shouldn't say yes to something that is not pleasurable and I don't want because it's not, but like, how am I going to handle the fact that I'm married to a man that wants a sexual relationship with me? And so what is my response to that? If I am making the response of I don't want a sexual relationship, full stop, then I should be honest about it and claim it and then let him figure out what he's going to do with that. But if I don't, because I find a lot of women, I keep saying women, but just like lower desire people,
Yeah.
where they can be low desire because their higher desire partner is always revolving around them. And so they know that they're secure. Where when the higher desire person says, you know what, I'm going to take no for an answer. I'm going to stop trying to make this something you don't want it to be. Then they get very activated. Like, wait a minute, wait a minute. Like,
Mhm.
I don't want you to give up, but they're not actually taking responsibility for the fact that I want this to be sexually exclusive. I want this to be that's fine and good that you don't want the sex you've been having, but then there's this space like, okay, what is the sex I would want? What is it that I want to say yes to? So it's not just in this reaction to outside forces. That's the only way you're going to create something peaceful.
Mhm.
So so I think it's important because it has such negative impact, but also helping women to or low desire people to get to what would yes look like, or thinking
Mhm.
about what is it that's happening that makes me not want this, and what impact will saying yes have on it, and what impact will saying no have on it, and what can I really stand behind. And so helping people take deeper responsibility for their choices is
Mhm.
always the way out.
Mhm. Yeah, you're right. I mean, if I've seen that too, someone taking the one up position of I don't ever want sex with the attitude of and you should be cool with that instead
Right.
of realizing like I don't
Right.
think I ever want to have sex again. That might not be cool with you. What would we
Right.
do?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Or knowing that he gets to make choices too.
He gets to make choices too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the caution of uh, not taking too simplistic of a view to see it as a complex dynamic. And I
Mm-hmm.
almost heard you saying in each of the questions, when it gets too simplistic,
Yeah.
um, people
The
can use
wrong
that
people
to
can grab that.
manipulate it.
Yeah.
Yeah. When we go too
Exactly.
simplistic, we just manipulate each other and
Yeah.
take the
Yeah.
I'm right position. But
Yeah.
when we're looking at it as a complex dynamic, there's shared
Yeah.
responsibility.
Right. And who am I in this and who am I in my life? And yeah, I always find that's the thing that helps people get healthier is just taking 100% responsibility for themselves and their choices and no
Mhm.
responsibility for other people's choices. What I mean is, I have to figure out if I'm going to be in a sexual relationship, and if I am, how and in what form. And my spouse gets to make their own choices about that. Right. So it's, it's just when we're less mature in our development, we co-construct our powerlessness in a way that keeps relationships stuck.
Mhm.
Hmm.
I've got an additional question. I know we're right up against the clock and I didn't
Hmm.
prepare you, but how often do you see people do this to take the responsibility to turn it around and to create a mutually satisfying sexual experience? I believe it's possible. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, I mean, it's so
It's
subjective.
very possible. It's very possible. I mean, it depends a lot. I see it happen quite a bit, actually, but I think it depends on a few things. One is how unhealthy is the couple. So
Mm,
some people are just kind of trapped in a meaning, and then they don't even work with me. They listen to podcasts, they take the courses, and they're like they can see what they've been doing and they can start not doing it anymore. And so it just starts getting better and they start respecting each other more and desiring each other more. And they just are given a new way of understanding what's happening, and a new form of partnership is emerges. I think there's people that are much more trapped in, like talking about the kind of archetypal couple where he's very
Mhm.
coercive and demanding and she's compliant. They both came from, I have a couple in mind. They both came from homes where the father was, on his side was demanding and the mother just did whatever. And she came from a home where her mother did whatever her father did, even though they were very toxic relationships. So they're very accustomed to this way of being. And so it's a much harder lift. I'm not saying people can't make progress, but it requires, if it's going to really change, it requires both people that are willing to look honestly at themselves and deal with themselves and really change what they're doing
Yeah.
to create something better, freer, happier. And you don't have to go from 0 to 100 for the marriage. Even when people are like in a really tough spot and they just start doing better and they start, like you don't come in with the criticism and you watch yourself and you like settle down, and she doesn't just run in to like comply, but she kind of settles down. Things can get better.
Mhm.
Um, Even if they're not as good as maybe they might want, they still are operating in a marriage that feels freer. So, but for me, my experience with people is seeing themselves honestly is their best chance. Now, people can take what I say and be
Mhm.
like, no, I'm not going to deal with that. And I'm going to disagree with her and whatever. But when people will see it and say, okay, I see how I'm part of the problem, and they deal with their half, they get clearer inside, and they increase the chance that something better in the marriage will happen.
Mhm. And there's plenty of people who aren't able or willing to do that
Yeah,
part.
that's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
I
Good.
appreciate your intelligence and your experience and your lens and your time and
Sure.
the mountains you're moving in your own
Mm.
world and your own circle of influence has been really I'm not trying to blow smoke. I really hope you see the good you do for people, even
Thank
if
you.
it is just a podcast or a course.
Yeah.
I've seen um, the LDS world almost shifting on its axis a degree or two from your
Mm.
influence, and
Thank you.
I think we're all
Thank you so
grateful for
much.
it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Well, have a
All
good
right.
day.
Well,
Appreciate
thank you,
it.
Cami, you too, and good luck with everything you're doing. And so yeah.
Thank you. All right,
Okay,
talk
take
soon.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.